For us, China is a really core market. So we fly 17 airline routes to 13 destinations in mainland China and Hong Kong. And for us, that's a really important part of our story as Heathrow, as the UK's only hub airport, connecting the huge market there is in China, particularly around e-commerce trade flows through Europe and out also to America and to the Middle East as well. Those are our kind of core catchment areas. So really important to be here talking with Chinese forwarders, Chinese airlines, and some shippers as well. I've had really interesting conversations with shippers, really keen to get their product into the UK market. And of course, we have the capacity to do that at Heathrow.
Hi everybody, this is Libin, Chacko, Kurian from Stat Media Group. We are here in Shanghai for Air Cargo China 2024. Right now I'm sitting down for a video interview with a very important person. He is the head of cargo for one of the most connected airports in the world, the London Heathrow Airport. James, thank you so much for joining us today.
Libin, it's a real pleasure to be here.
Let us talk about the numbers first, okay? From June 2023 to May 2024, the London Heathrow Airport handled 1.5 million metric tons of cargo, an increase of 12.4% from the previous year. But it is not still back to the 2017 or 18 when it was around 1.8 million metric tons. Give us an idea about the cargo strategy that you are employing at the airport right now.
Sure. So our cargo strategy is all about growing Heathrow's cargo proposition. And a really core part of that for us is to build back our volume, so grow our tonnage and also grow our market share as well. We know that our unique position as the UK's only hub airport is really critical for UK trade, but not just UK in isolation, also European trade as well. And so a big part of what we want to do is build back those volumes to pre-COVID levels and indeed exceed those pre-COVID levels so that in the future we'll be getting closer to 2 million tons per year. And that's all through the result of upgauging our aircraft, filling those bellies as full as they can be with cargo, and of course providing our passengers with a great route network as well.
Okay, tell us some of the interesting cargo that moves through Heathrow Airport. What excites you, for example, is that the sea turtle that came through your airport, handled at your airport, or it is a salmon that is getting exported? What is the cargo that excites you?
Absolutely. So I think two of the most popular exports that we make to around the world is whiskey from Scotland and that salmon that you mentioned. But for me, the really special cargo is the cargo that really impacts people's lives for the better. So a huge amount of vaccine product, a huge amount of medical product. And then there are those emotional bits of cargo that we say that are actually live. So our live animal proposition is really unique in the UK context. We have 3 live animal border control posts, including our Heathrow Animal Reception Centre, which is the only border control post in the UK that's capable of handling all animal species. And that is absolutely exemplified by Tally, the sea turtle, who we flew back to the States after she was washed up on the Welsh coast. So those emotional, unique stories is really what makes the magic of cargo for me at Heathrow.
In a recent interview, when asked about the challenges that you face in the cargo industry, the first thing that you mentioned, and I quote, is the pressing need to decarbonize the aviation industry. Okay. Also, in 2022, the airport launched the Heathrow 2.0 strategy. It's about the sustainability strategy. Tell us about where we are right now in terms of maybe promoting the sustainable aviation fuel or other sustainability methods, for example.
So we're really proud at Heathrow that we have a really important sustainability strategy. Heathrow 2.0, as you mentioned, is our corporate sustainability strategy, and that really impacts everything that we do at Heathrow. So from a cargo perspective, we have 3 main elements of our cargo strategy. The first of those is growing volume and market share, as I mentioned earlier. The second is around increasing the efficiency of our operation, many of which has a sustainability impact. But then the third pillar is purely focused on sustainability, and for us to make Heathrow, and particularly our cargo proposition, a better place to work in from a colleague point of view, and better for our local neighbours to be adjacent to as well. Our cargo estate is really close to some local communities at Heathrow, and becoming a more sustainable neighbour is something that's really important to us. You mentioned carbon in particular, and I think it's really important to say that aviation itself and flying is not the enemy, carbon is. And for us, it's all about how do we take the carbon out of flying and indeed the carbon out of cargo as far as we can as well. And at Heathrow, a few years ago, we introduced our Sustainable Aviation Fuel Incentive Scheme. We're currently delivering 1.5% of SAF to our airlines at Heathrow. That sounds like a small number, But currently, given the scale of production of SAF, it is really significant in the global aviation market. We have plans to grow that to 2.5% next year. That's a fund and an incentive scheme worth £71 million. And then by 2030 to grow that to 11% of all of the fuel at Heathrow to be derived from SAF sources.
Okay, can you also talk about the other sustainability efforts from your side? For example, how about building a new warehouse, for example, or modernizing your warehouses, facilities, and how you make sure that you are building it sustainably? And also another important thing is you're leading a very important team, and they have a great workplace, great life there at the airport. How you make sure that they are all sustainable?
Sure. So a couple of things. I think I'll talk about the team first, and then I'll come on to those infrastructure plans. For me, a team can only be sustainable if it's diverse. I'm really proud that my direct team is 50-50 split from a gender point of view between male and female colleagues. But there is so much more to diversity that we really need to bring to the broader logistics industry. And for me, diversity means diversity of thought in our industry. And only then will we be truly sustainable. So really want to put a lot of effort and focus into growing that talent, growing diverse talent at Heathrow, and making sure that the next generation of air cargo leaders come from multiple backgrounds. I think from an infrastructure perspective, we have really exciting plans at Heathrow to develop those older parts of our estate. We have a real mix of facilities currently, some that were built in the 1960s and some that were built in the last few years. So we're really pleased that we can offer those new facilities to our handlers, but we know that some of our handling colleagues are based in older buildings, and it's very difficult to provide truly sustainable operations if you're operating from a 1960s facility. So we're working very closely with our development partners and our property partners to understand when is the right time to commence those development plans. Lots of work going on behind the scenes, and I'm hopeful that at the next May trade show we'll be able to say a lot more about those plans. But watch this space, Libin, is what I would say.
We are here in Air Cargo China, and give us an idea about what is the kind of business that is coming, or the cargo coming from China to the Heathrow Airport. That's one thing. Also, give us, there are disruptions out there in the market. Give us an idea about how it is impacting the operations at Heathrow, and what are your strategies for that?
So firstly, fantastic to be here in China. The first time that this trade show has taken place since the pandemic. For us, China is a really core market. So we fly 17 airline routes to 13 destinations in mainland China and Hong Kong. And for us, that's a really important part of our story as Heathrow, as the UK's only hub airport, connecting the huge market there is in China, particularly around e-commerce trade flows through Europe. And out also to America and to the Middle East as well. Those are our kind of core catchment areas. So really important to be here talking with Chinese forwarders, Chinese airlines, and some shippers as well. I've had really interesting conversations with shippers, really keen to get their product into the UK market. And of course, we have the capacity to do that at Heathrow. I think at a broader macroeconomic level, there's clearly a lot going on in the world today. One of the big elements that is a real talking point at the moment is the challenges within shipping and ocean freight. I would say from a Heathrow perspective, more than 90% of our cargo flies in the belly hold of passenger aircraft. And what that means is that we typically don't deal in the huge amount of oversized cargo, outsized cargo that might be more at home on a freighter aircraft or indeed in the shipping lanes. So we've not been as affected by the Red Sea crisis as potentially some of our European comparator airports. But nevertheless, any disruption anywhere in the world does naturally flow through given the scale of operations at Heathrow. But we remain committed to our strategy, growing volume and market share. And as and when those issues crop up from a macroeconomic perspective, we stand ready to serve that demand.
You mentioned 3 pillars for your strategy. The first one is about the volume, the share that comes in. How you make sure that Heathrow Airport remains at that top position compared to other competitors, maybe in the European, market, for example, other Europes. You already mentioned about how it is different from other airports because of more passenger belly capacity available, 95%, and very few freighters coming in, for example. How you manage that position?
Well, with our really strong network, 110 long-haul destinations, Many of those are served from a multiple frequency perspective. So take the New York to JFK route. We have multiple airlines operating that route, and we have a departure pretty much every hour for the majority of the day. So when a shipper or a forwarder needs to get their product to market in New York, they know with confidence that we have that belly capacity and we have the frequency to deliver their product same day. So that's really the USP of Heathrow, is the strength of its long-haul network, the strength of its belly capacity. I think where we see challenges is in the trucking operations currently. We really want to grow the efficiency of our trucking operations, so deliveries to and from our various different cargo estates. And we're working with our community to establish a steering group that will ultimately implement a slot booking system for trucks at Heathrow. And that will make our operations far more efficient. So that middle pillar that I spoke about from our cargo strategy point of view, increasing efficiency, making sure that we're really landing those deliveries and collections as swiftly and as smoothly as possible, so that they can then be built and broken in forwarders' warehouses, all of which are located within a very tight 5-kilometre radius of Heathrow, 50 forwarders within that radius, which are then obviously trucking that product into and out of mainland Europe. So for us, USP is all around those frequencies and making sure that we've got the road network and we've got the digital solutions to support really efficient road-based operations to service that air network.
Yeah, so the second pillar of your strategy is about efficiency. You're already talking about that, but can you give me an idea about that from the infrastructure perspective? Okay, what is happening at the terminals of Heathrow, for example? How are they getting modernized and how are they efficient?
So a couple of things I'd call out here. We have 11 cargo handlers at Heathrow. All of them, to a greater or lesser extent, are really pushing automation within their warehouses. A big focus on ETV type solutions, a big focus on digital and connecting upstream through the supply chain, so connecting back into their forwarding partners. And we have really lucky to have a fantastic cargo community system, CCS UK, for really efficient customs declarations, both from an import and an export perspective. So lots going on within the handler's remit. From my perspective as the airport operator, I'd come back to that slot booking system that I mentioned, but also thinking about when we start to transform those operations, transform the infrastructure and our cargo warehouses, really focusing in on that landside to airside transition. So for all of those handlers that have the first line facilities at Heathrow, how can we more efficiently get that product to transition from a landside environment into the secure zone, into the airside part of our airport? And we do that through an increased number of doors, but also making sure that we've got that security technology in place on those doors that means that cargo doesn't have to be rescreened.
You mentioned the cargo community system, for example. As the head of cargo at Heathrow Airport, you're leading a team that is responsible for the development and deployment of the cargo strategy. One of the important things that you might be doing or important for you, is the relationship with the community around you. You're talking about the forwarders, airlines, the handlers, everybody. So how is that cargo community system helping you in maintaining that relationship and bringing them together? I'll give you a sense of what is happening there.
Yeah, so we have recently established a cargo steering group, which is comprised of all of our key customer groups. So our handlers, our forwarders, our airlines, our hauliers, our border control posts, our regulators, so Border Force are an integral part of our operation. And really, without the collaboration of all of those key customer groups, we don't have a cargo proposition. So I spoke earlier about how our cargo strategy is to grow Heathrow's cargo proposition. We can only do that with the community and alongside the community. So by establishing that steering group, we have a formal governance structure, if you like, which will allow us to really make some very fast and focused decisions around how do we improve the cargo proposition at Heathrow. An example would be the slot booking system. We can only introduce that slot booking system with the cooperation and engagement of our entire cargo community. And I'm really pleased to say that all of our key stakeholders are on board with that approach and are represented by at least one of their fellow partners on that steering group. So all of our forwarders, for example, represented by BIFA, British International Freight Association. And that's the same type of model regardless of customer type. We make sure that person who is appointed as the head of that customer group is empowered to make decisions on behalf of that group and therefore makes the cargo steering group at Heathrow as most efficient as it can be.
Do you see some tangible effects of this community building? Do you see any time getting reduced or money saving What is happening?
I would say it's probably a little too early for us to tell. It's a relatively new thing that we've established. What I would say is if you look at some of our comparator airports that have implemented this previously, so the likes of Brussels, the likes of Frankfurt, the likes of Amsterdam, really strong propositions at all three of those airports. And they've definitely seen the value and benefit of cargo community systems. We've spent time with all of those airports. We're very good friends with all of those airports. And we've hopefully taken the best of each of those and combined it into our thinking around the steering group. So I hope, again, next time we're having a conversation, Libin, that I'm able to share some actual indicators of that steering group success.
Talking about the Chinese market, one thing that we missed is the increase of cargo, particularly due to the e-commerce boom, for example. Can you give us an idea about how much of that cargo is coming to Heathrow, for example, the e-commerce cargo, and how much difficult it is to, or what is the challenging part of handling that cargo, for example?
I would come back to that route network that I spoke about previously. So 17 routes, 17 airlines that forwarders and shippers have to choose from. A lot of our imports from China is naturally going to be e-commerce at this time. I think it's a really important market, but I think one that we need to watch as well from a sustainability perspective. So you've seen some of the challenges in the States currently, the United States, around customs declarations. And we really want to make sure at Heathrow that we're a little bit ahead of the curve there. So if there are any increased enforcement, increased customs checks, we're making sure that we're working with our community to make sure that those are implemented as smoothly as possible. Because for us, we will never compromise border security, and we work very closely with Border Force to make sure that that's the case. So for me, it's a balance to be found between the clear demand for e-commerce, but also making sure that that is delivered in a sustainable way and a safe way as well.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the challenges here in moving the e-commerce from China to Europe. I have also seen some of the European airports here in China reaching out to some of these shippers, ensuring that there are no problems in handling the customs, because most of this cargo, for example, goes to Liège or Amsterdam. There are other airports also trying to get a share of that. So what is happening from your airport's perspective?
Yeah, I think we're blessed to have a really fantastic courier operation at Heathrow. Which we don't operate ourselves directly, but we have Courier Facilities Limited, which is relatively unique, certainly in the UK context, in that it works with multiple handlers at Heathrow to really service that e-commerce demand and that courier product demand. They are the experts in e-commerce from a UK perspective, and I know are working very closely with their customer base. I believe very strongly that there is demand and capacity at all of our airports across Europe. And for me, it's not about necessarily capturing market share from other airports. It's more about making sure that the global trade in e-commerce can be delivered as efficiently and as safely and as sustainably as it can possibly be.
This is my last question. Heathrow is a very important airport for the global trade because it connects to so many airports, so many cities around the world. As the head of cargo at this airport, give us an idea about what is the future of this airport in the next 5 years.
I'm really excited about the future of Heathrow. We've existed for almost 80 years. A lot has changed during that time. We're one of the oldest airports in the UK and indeed in the world. And if you look at our history, we have changed significantly over those 80 years. And I think the best is yet to come. We are developing plans currently around how we expand capacity at the airport, both within our 2-runway system and ultimately with potentially a 3rd runway. We're currently reviewing those plans, and I'm sure that we will have more to say on that in the future. But for me, currently, the focus is coming back to that cargo strategy, making sure that we're growing volume and market share, increasing efficiency, and doing all of that as sustainably as we possibly can.
James, thank you so much for joining us today.
Libin, it's a real pleasure. Thank you.